Hi, NASCAR fans. Welcome to this week's edition of the newly branded Dan Beaver's NASCAR Fantasy Pit Stop. I'm your announcer man, Charlie Turner, and I'm joined by the NASCAR Fantasy Racing Guru, Dan Beaver. Hey, Dan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great. Beautiful day in Central Texas. A little warm, but I'll take it.
It's actually a beautiful day here in the Midwest, too. I'm sitting about 90 minutes away from Michigan International Speedway in Brooklyn, Michigan in the Irish Hills, and it looks like we're going to have, knock on wood, a non-rainy race weekend for Michigan, which would be unique lately, last several years. So it should be good. Everybody in this part of the country is very excited for the Cup guys to show up for the first time at Michigan. And it should be an interesting race, I think, this week.
90 minutes away. Does that mean about 5 miles? 10 miles?
Well, the time I leave, it's 90 minutes. I avoid traffic like as much as I possibly can. But
that's why they have donuts in the media center.
That's right. Depending on when you leave, it could be 90 minutes or it could be 3 hours from my house. So it just depends.
Yeah. I've made the drive from the other direction, Ann Arbor, Detroit. So, and there are some pretty good choke points if you don't plan ahead.
Yeah, well, it's nothing but one big choke point, really, once you get close to the track. So you just have to. We've done it enough to we pretty much know when to go and how to avoid it. We have to get there early anyway for photographers' meetings and those kinds of things, so it's no worries. And you're right, the media center is accommodating.
Yeah.
They have the best cookies in NASCAR at Michigan International Speedway in the media center. So anyway, we've got some new players this week in the Cup Series. Juan Pablo Montoya is going to show up for the first of 2 scheduled races, I guess, with Penske Racing. Going to be driving the number 12 car. How's that impact fantasy picks this week?
I think it impacts it kind of across the board, not just in games like Yahoo where you really need a good Group C driver, because Kyle Larson and Austin Dillon have been dominating to the point that you're going to over-allocate them, or you're going to run out of allocations on them almost immediately. But it also impacts things like salary cap games because they come in and it's kind of impossible to give a brand new driver for the season a salary cap that is really reflects their skill. Juan Pablo certainly has great skill. He never really got that oval win. He got a couple of road track wins, but from time to time, when he had the right equipment, when the equipment was there, he could challenge for a top 5. And there's no reason to think that the Penske Racing equipment is not going to be as good for him as it is for Brad Keselowski and Joe Logano. Then you got to worry a little bit about chemistry. The driver and the crew chief aren't speaking the same language every week, so that's going to take off a position or two. But Montoya could land into that top 10, or at least challenge for a top 10.
One of the things that'll be interesting to see about that story, and I don't want to spend the whole show talking about Juan Pablo Montoya, but he did not have the results at Ganassi Racing that we've seen from Larson so far this year. And there's been talk that maybe it was a communication problem with with his crew chief, whoever, I don't remember who that was at
Chris Heroy.
Maybe maybe they'll strike some kind of magic with whoever he lines up with at Penske Racing. And Roger Penske's not the type of owner that would put out a third car without it being, I would say, equal to the other two. That's not a Penske thing. So I would expect the equipment to be first rate. Maybe they'll get lucky with the chemistry. And if Juan Pablo isn't overcome by the red mist, he certainly may feel like he has something to prove this week, getting back in a NASCAR Sprint Cup car after the success that Larson's had in that Target car at Ganassi.
Yeah, and that's good for 1 or 2 positions in the other direction.
Right.
So whatever he might lose with some lack of chemistry, he's going to make up for in motivation. He definitely wants to prove that he could still do it in stock cars if he had a full-time ride. I would think.
Yeah, I would think so. I think it's overall a positive this week. It'd be a really interesting story to watch, and we'll see what happens. Also, we have Trevor Bayne's going to be in contention. You think he's also a possible pick for a C-level driver?
He is. He's going to get overshadowed by Montoya this week because you can only pick one driver. You can only start one driver. There is the outside possibility that qualification could be canceled. So you probably don't want to put Montoya and Bayne both on your Group C list because as part-time teams, I think they're the two that would go home in a 45-car roster. So he might get overlooked, but he certainly would be in contention for a top team if everything goes right. His best runs come on the unrestricted intermediate speedways because that's where the Wood brothers show up. But he's hovered in that mid-teen range enough times that you can't overlook him. And if you've got a bad feeling about Montoya, or if you think that most of the people in your league are going to have Montoya, then Bayne is a good differentiator.
We talked a little bit on the On Pit Row Hangout on Tuesday about the predictability of these 2-mile tracks, Michigan and Auto Club. And you said that they are the most, of the paired up tracks, they are the most alike. So you have recent history that you can use to help you with making your picks this week. If you're a prognosticator, if you're playing the games, you can look at what happened at Michigan the last couple of years, what happened at Auto Club this year and the past couple of years, and get some fairly recent data to make your decisions. People also, there are sites out there that push loop data as a determining factor on how to make these picks. And if you look at the loop data for Michigan, which I pulled up the box score, they call it, which is like the 13 top categories of loop data that they kind of graded out of what they call this box score thing. Mm-hmm. The top 3 drivers are Roush drivers. Well, I still think of Matt Kenseth as a Roush driver, I guess, but Greg Biffle, Matt Kenseth, Carl Edwards are the top 3 in overall driver rating for loop data. But this is based on 18 races. I mean, how real are those numbers?
Yeah, and it's right to think of Matt Kenseth as a Roush driver where the loop data is concerned because that's where the majority of his results came from.
Right.
It's timing out. I wish that I understand why they want to have career stats, but it'd be nice if they had career and 3-year stats. Mm-hmm. That would give us something that's a little more predictive, a little more meaningful. You've got drivers in the loop data stats now that haven't raced for a couple of years, and sometimes they can make their way up to the top and really kind of skew the numbers.
Yeah, Mark Martin as an example.
Yeah. And in terms of something like driver rating, though, it levels out a little bit more than it does in something like average running position because there's so many factors that go into driver rating that you can kind of soften that peak and valley out a little bit. So it's as meaningful as the number of top 10s a driver has at a track or the number of wins a driver has at a track. It does indicate that they have been strong there. Mm-hmm. And Matt Kenseth, when he left Roush Fenway Racing, he at least took his mental notes with him. He knows what he wants to feel in the car, and he took that to Joe Gibbs Racing, and it carries over. So you have to take it with a grain of salt, maybe 2 grains of salt, but I look at it. Mostly I put it in my database so that I can parse it however I want to parse it. But most fans can't do that, and that's why you watch us here on the pit stop and
that's right.
Read the fantasy coverage that's out there because you got someone with too much time on their hands like me dealing with it.
Yeah, so as I recall from our conversation 2 days ago when we talked a little bit about the fantasy aspects of Michigan, you still kind of like Matt Kenseth for this week, don't you?
I do. Joe Gibbs Racing hasn't done anything to show that they can't be competitive on the 2-mile tracks. Kyle Busch winning at Auto Club is just part of that. So they're going to be strong overall. I think all 3 Gibbs guys will run strong. Kyle Busch, it's always difficult to predict a good finish from him because he could slap the wall, he could do something rash in the Cup Series, but he's going to run strong. And kind of backing up just a minute to the comparison between the 2 mile tracks. Last year we had, I think it was 3 drivers who swept the top 10 at Auto Club and Michigan, and another 3 or 4 drivers that swept the top 15. So that says to me why that they're comparatives. They're good comparatives. And of the drivers that finished strong last year in the second Michigan race, 3 of them, 4 of them finished the top 10, top 15. So, it's there. It's a number that you want to look at. Go ahead.
No, that's okay.
Back to Kenseth, though. Kenseth knows what he wants in the car. He knows how it should feel. He's got good equipment. So this is a good chance for him to make the chase. And I think I said earlier this week, if Matt Kenseth makes the chase, it's probably going to be because of his run at Michigan. It's going to be because he wins one of these 2 races, either now or in August.
Yeah, I agree with you there. I think he's got to show it at this track, one of these 2 races in the next 6, 7, 8 weeks, whatever it's going to be. Because I don't see a lot of other opportunities out there where you would automatically look and say, "Hey, Matt Kenseth is a guy here."
No, not where he's going to be as popular or as strong from the records standpoint as here. But we still have some similarly configured mile and a half tracks that'll pop up. Kentucky will be a good track for him. And that's where he was so strong last year on the 1.5 and 2 mile tracks that are either dog-legged or double dog-legged ovals. So he's still got a couple of opportunities, but I think his best opportunity is Michigan.
Okay, any other bargains this week for salary cap players? I mean, we talked about Bain and Montoya. Who else? Anybody else that jumps out at you?
If you're looking for a bargain, Brett Moffitt, I think, is someone that you've got to consider. Jumping on a bandwagon is inherently dangerous. It's moving, and you could fall off the back of it just as easily as you can land on it and have it take you where you want it to go. Have it take you where you want to go. I don't think that Moffitt will run as strong this week as he did at Dover. Totally different track. Dover is a little bit more of a driver's track. This is a little bit more of a horsepower track. But he's probably going to perform well enough that he'd be a good salary cap play, especially if he qualifies badly. So in something like the NASCAR.com game where they reward place differential, or in the Roto, the Sports Trade X games where they have place differential as one of the things. It's not a salary cap game, but if he qualifies badly, then he's going to be a driver to watch for that standpoint. You've got some of the rookies are starting to catch up a little bit to the top 2. They're not going to catch up to them in a way that they threaten them by the end of the year. But Justin Allgaier and Michael Annett look like better choices to get into that low 20s than they did in the beginning of the season. And that's how a rookie's supposed to work. So they're going to be good salary cap plays. But it's a little bit of a roll of the dice. One of them is probably going to finish in the top 25. Which of those 2 drivers finishes in the top 25 is going to be a bit of a guess.
We've got Nationwide Series running at Michigan this week, along with the Cup guys, and the ARCA Series is running as well. Do you put any weight behind if a driver does well in a nationwide race, if a driver wins, let's say Kyle Larson wins a nationwide race, does that move him up in your Sprint Cup thinking for this track or not?
Depends on the driver and it depends on the circumstances. Kyle Busch, no, it wouldn't make a difference one way or the other. I mean, he's come so close to sweeping three races in a row, running well in the trucks and the Nationwide Series, and then he's still got that same inability to stay within himself in the Cup race. So those extra laps in the Nationwide Series or the Truck Series really doesn't help you that much. Kyle Larson, I think yes. His second place finish at Auto Club earlier this year came on the heels of an extremely strong Nationwide Series race. So for him, it's laps. And last week's strong run at Pocono came after he won the ARCA race at Pocono. So for him, he needs the laps. He needs the confidence. He needs that track time, and it makes a difference for him. Kevin Harvick, it's not going to make any difference. So I think the further you go up in the experience level, probably the less impact it has, and they're doing it more for fun and to win the race than they are to get anything really for their Cup setups.
But drivers like Kyle Larson, Allgaier, Annette, any of these rookies that do well in the Nationwide Series, that would have some impact on how you think they're going to do in the big race Sunday?
Yeah, I would think so. And for a driver like Allgaier and Annette, now that they've got through this first third of the season and they're used to working on the Cup cars, if I were a car owner, I would be trying to do a deal with some other major car owner like Turner Motorsports that's running Kyle Larson whenever he can, and get them that kind of seat time, but in competitive equipment. It doesn't do them any good to run around in the back. But if they can get into some sort of competitive equipment, and they can, I think Larson's a good example of what it is that they could get out of it.
Okay. Well, we're at about the halfway point of our fantasy pit stop this week. We probably should start talking a little bit more seriously about the Yahoo game, since that's the big dog in the fantasy NASCAR room, I would say. How do you advise somebody that's going to Michigan for the first time? What should they do with their Yahoo team this week?
Well, because of the compatibility, the comparativeness of Auto Club and Michigan, that's the tracks. You're going to want to look at those two tracks as a group. Michigan is unique enough. It straddles that line between similarly configured mile-and-a-half track and restrictor plate super speedway, so that it has its own. I think of it as one of NASCAR's perfect tracks. You look at Auto Club, you look at Michigan, you look at Richmond. Some of these that are in the middle between two other great track or good track types tend to be perfect tracks because they give you a lot more contenders at the front. Michigan's got wide corners. You can make passes here. It's only a 400-mile race, so qualifying is important, but you can get to the front. So if a driver blows qualification and starts mid-pack or even a little bit further back, he's probably okay. And what you're looking at is a driver's record at Michigan is going to be the primary bit of data that you set your roster from. And luckily, we've been coming here twice a year forever. Went to Auto Club twice a year for a long time until just recently. So there's a lot of data to look at, and I think that's going to help fantasy players. Also, remember that the Yahoo roster's locked tonight. If you're watching this on Thursday, if you're watching it on Friday, sorry, should have watched it yesterday. And you got to make sure that you got your provisional lineup set so that you can make so that you're at least getting the right drivers, making the decision on the right drivers. Downside of that is you really don't have any of this week's data to go on. You have to go on that old data, that historic data. Okay,
so looking at the drivers who have done, again, I've got this loop data up, just to give an overview of drivers who've done well. We talked about Biffle and Greg Biffle's got the top driver rating in 18 of the last 18 races at Michigan International. No, actually, with Michigan Speedway now they're calling it. Matt Kenseth's second, Carl Edwards third. Those, I would think Edwards is certainly somebody you'd have to consider this week. But Jimmy Johnson and Dale Earnhardt Jr. are fourth and fifth on that list, and those two guys have recent, I would say, recent momentum from the last 2-3 races. Is that a consideration this week?
Yeah, I think it has to be. And Hendrick Motorsports in general, they've won the last 4 races. Jeff Gordon at Kansas, Jimmy Johnson at Charlotte and Dover, and Dale Earnhardt at Pocono. Could be a good time then to roll the dice on Casey Kane. He's run well here in the past too. He definitely would be a long shot in Group A. I think I've got him ranked down towards the bottom of that group at the moment, mostly because I've got him ranked 8th at the moment in the Yahoo preview. but that's because you just don't know what he's going to do.
Right.
He could run afoul of Kyle Busch again, engine could blow. But if you wanted to roll the dice, Hendrick Motorsports has been just as strong as Roush Fenway here, or almost as strong as Roush Fenway, as an ownership group. And with Roush a little bit on the downslide at the moment, all four Hendrick Motorsports drivers could end up in the top 10. Problem is they're all four in Yahoo's Group A, so you really have to get that ranking right, and that's it's a bit of a gamble sometimes. Kane could be a gamble, but he could be a gamble worth taking. Kevin Harvick is run extremely well on the unrestricted intermediate speedways, 1.5 mile and 2 mile tracks. So long as they don't make a mistake in the pit stops, in the pits, which they can, Kevin Harvick should be challenging for that for the top 5 and maybe even the victory. He's who I currently have ranked #1 in Yahoo. So, and that's hedging my bets just a little bit, to be quite honest. If you rank him low and he runs as well as he can possibly, then you look like an idiot. If you rank him high and he wrecks, you can at least blame, or screws up in the pits, you can at least blame it on the pit crew. So
the secrets of the fantasy writer.
Yeah. I've done this long enough. I've been trolled. Many times for not putting the right driver in the right place. To which I usually reply, "I'm not driving the cars. I'm not responsible for them wrecking."
Yeah, I had them rated right. They just didn't drive right.
They just didn't finish where I ranked them.
That's right. Not my fault.
Jumping down to Group B, I think B continues to be the most challenging level. The Penske guys have got to be in that top 4, top 5. Logano, Keselowski, and then by stretch there.
Osmosis, you got to put Montoya in there,
yeah.
But he's going to be in C, right?
He's going to be in C, but you're going to look at Penske, I think, as a group, and so both of them are going to run well, and they're going to bring Montoya up to their level. The Roush Fenway guys, if they were in Group A, I probably would not take much. I wouldn't take a risk on them. But since they're in Group B, you've got a little more leeway. You can get a solid top 10 or a solid top 15 out of a Group B driver, so long as some of the other marquee drivers don't overshadow them completely. Joey Logano or Brad Keselowski wins, and Biffle and Edwards finish 10th and 11th. It impacts your score, but a 10th or an 11th place finish is often good enough to get a Group B driver up there in that top 4 or 5.
Mm-hmm.
I think Paul Menard is probably the driver that might be the most surprising good pick in Group B. He's run well on the 2 mile tracks in the last 2.5 years, going back to fall 2012 at Michigan. He finished 9th in that race, and since then his worst finish has been a 14th in this race last year. But he also finished 4th in the August race at Michigan. So he's also a little hit and miss. But he usually, if he starts off good for the weekend, he stays good for a while. I would put Paul Menard on your provisional roster and then watch him on Saturday, see how he practices. If he's starting near the front, then he could be the best differentiator in Group B. And between those guys, the Roush Fenway guys, the Penske guys, Paul Menard, I think you've got enough drivers to make your choices. If you don't, then the next unaffiliated driver is probably Ryan Newman. Runs well on this track. He's starting to come into his own at Richard Childress Racing, not making the same mistakes that they've made in the past. And he's going to have Menard's notes as well. His notes from Stuart Haas last year, Menard's notes from the last couple of years for Richard Childress. And those two things combined should bode well for him. Jump down to Group C, and Group C is going to be fun to watch. Picking it's kind of difficult. I've got Kyle Larson ranked #1, but I wouldn't start him because I'm not sure that this will be one of his 10 best tracks, 9 best tracks. races by the end of the year. You're going to use him up before the end of the year. You could have used him up already if you used him every time that he was one of the top drivers. So he's ranked number one because I think he'll probably finish the best of the Group C drivers, but it'd be difficult to start him because of those considerations. So Montoya, I think, is your logical choice to start. Austin Dillon has a streak of 3 top 15s on 2-mile tracks, so he's going to be a close third. Again, you don't want to start him because of allocation management. And then Trevor Bayne right on their heels. You've got the possibility that 3 of your Group C drivers could challenge for top 10s, and 4 of them could challenge for top 15s. We could have as many Group C drivers in the top 10 as we do either Group A or Group B this week, and that's gonna shake up a lot of lineups.
Interesting. I mean, I think this is one of the first race at Michigan. I think is one of the most interesting races to try to predict, because you have data that you can refer to, but you also have these early season performance trends that haven't all totally shaken out yet. You have things that maybe can be mirages at this point in the season, 14 races in. So it'll be interesting to see what happens.
And Auto Club was so early that some of the drivers who ran well at Auto Club, you can't automatically assume that they're going to run well at Michigan. But I think it's still a good jumping off point.
Yep. Okay. Anything else we need to cover? We have any final tips for anybody that's sitting there getting ready to set their roster today for their Yahoo game?
Oh, probably not. I think that pretty much covers it, most of it. But make sure that you're following me on Twitter if you're not, at Fantasy Race. You can ask me questions there. I will answer them. You might get a little sarcastic snark from time to time if you're following me. But
yeah, you might.
Yeah, okay, you probably will. But it's a good way to keep up with who I think where the odds have changed. And then make sure that you read the qualification story that gets posted at Yahoo a couple of hours after qualifying is done, because opinions do change. Last week, Kurt Busch jumped up remarkably after practicing and qualifying well. And if you'd read the qualification story, you might have had a chance to pick him up if you're one of the few drivers that had him on your provisional roster. And if you weren't, and you're reading it for some other reason, then Kyle Busch could have been a good dark horse. Kurt Busch, rather, could have been a good dark horse a pick if you're using those PDFs for some other game.
All right, he's Dan Beaver. Follow him on Twitter at Fantasy Race. You can follow me, Charlie Turner, at On Pit Row, and you'll be able to watch the replay of this Dan Beaver's NASCAR Fantasy Pit Stop on the On Pit Row Facebook page until you can watch it all through the weekend. You can watch it after the race on Sunday and commiserate about why you should have watched it. You can also catch it on the On Pit Row YouTube page as well. So thanks, Dan. We'll do this again. We'll talk. We'll hang out again on Tuesday, the On Pit Row Hangout, and then we'll do this fantasy thing again next week when we talk about the first road course race of the year at Sonoma. Or should I date myself? Call it Sears Point.
But Sears Point, Sonoma, and Finian. You got a couple of choices.
Yeah, the wine country. Oh no, that was when Rusty Wallace was running it. Okay. All right. Thanks everybody. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you again next week.